Good morning, everyone. It's now just after 11 a.m, so let's start with today's webinar on the use of assistive technology and the use of mainstream as opposed to disability-specific technology. A warm welcome to everyone who has logged on and shown interest. My name is Lauren Haas. I'm an associate solicitor in the serious injury team and deal with brain injuries, spinal injuries and polytrauma. I've been doing this for 10 plus years. And of course, that also includes cases in which a disability results in today's speaker, Andy Fell, becoming involved as a specialist expert. Before I go into detail on Andy's impressive qualifications, first some housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded and everyone who has registered will receive a YouTube link in the next few days. In terms of asking questions, thank you to those of you who have already submitted questions. We are asking participants to do so during the webinar via the Q&A button on your taskbar. Could you please also add your name and email address to the question put, as that will allow us to get back to you after the event if time doesn't permit us to deal with your query today. Towards the end of the talk, I'll also provide you with details for Irwin Mitchell's Coronavirus Hub, which really is very informative and provides loads of information, both legal and financial, relating to the pandemic and any queries you may have about this. So on to our very knowledgeable speaker, Andy Fell of SMA Legal. Andy is a specialist independent disability and assistive technology consultant with almost 20 years experience working with all disabilities and age groups, and will no doubt give you some background to his journey himself. He's a qualified rehabilitation officer for the visually impaired, and since qualification he has lectured on the use of assistive technology and role of AT in the life of disabled people. He's also accredited as a trainer and consulted by many of the major assistive technology software and hardware companies. So without further ado, over to Andy.
Good morning all, and thanks Lauren, that's very kind of you to say that, and thanks to Irwin Mitchell for inviting me along this morning to talk to you all. Just to give you a little bit of extended background to that, I joined Steve Martin Associates, and some of you will know as SMA, with a very firm background in visual impairment. But that's progressed on, and then I work with a broad spread of disabilities. I also helped establish a charity called Wet Wheels, and for my sins, I'm now the chairman. And we're an organisation that provides disabled people, including wheelchair users and those with profound and often life-limiting conditions, the exposure to the open sea and the pleasures of a powerboat. We've got 5 boats and soon to be 6. Like the one in the picture there, and many of those users will have the opportunity to drive that boat. Steve Martin Associates, run by Mike Gomm, who I'm sure many of you will know, now have 6 consultants including myself. And if you want any more information, if you go to our website under our people heading, you'll be able to find information on each of us together with a CV. Being part of a team, we have the opportunity to share knowledge and experience. And we believe that that sets us apart from the solo or the one-man band experts, because we meet very regularly, we exchange information, and we attend CPD events and conferences together. And we either have or are working towards Bonsallon Cardiff University accreditation. Much to my wife's displeasure, we also invest in a lot of equipment. Some would say we might be a bit geeky, but you know, that's what we do. We work with technology. We know about alternative keyboards. We know about alternative mice, the big keys and the roller keys. And we can offer a view on smart speakers, home automation. And some would say, if you come into my house, it's a bit of a test bed, but we give it a go. And we do our research. We understand the pros and cons of an eye gaze technique system that I'm sure many of you know of versus a head operated mouse We've got the kit, we play with it, and we take it out and show it. We work with many of the large names and companies in the sector, and as a group we often make visits to smart technology and environmental control specialists such as PC by Voice. Suppliers like Leveland and Smartbox are always willing to come to us and show us their latest equipment, and we believe that we present a worthwhile audience. So as an organization, and for those of you who haven't heard of us, we have the expertise to address the technology needs presented by any disabling condition. We understand the needs of Part 35 and the litigation process. And hopefully we have the report writing skills you'd expect. Once again, thank you to Erwin Mitchell for inviting me to be along today, and thank you to you also for sparing the time to take part and listening to what we're doing. It's a big issue, and it's become more and more so that when I go into conversations and case conferences, what piece of mainstream technology can we use? Can we use Alexa? Can we use Siri? Can we use any other forms of technology? And I think it's important that we have a look at the mainstream technology, because it has had, for an awful lot of my clients, a really, really positive impact with them and their disabilities. But their disabilities alongside their independence. Yes, quite often we're working with clients who need a 24-hour care regime, but they should also be able to open and close a curtain when they want to. They should have that level of independence. And what I hope is that through this small session this morning, we'll get a little bit of a view about how we can offer what to us is something that's fairly simple and everyday, but to somebody with a limiting disability gives them that extra independence. And let's not forget that we're not just talking about physical disabilities. We're hearing more and more and more on the news about mental disabilities and the difficulties that people have with working short-term memory. The difficulties we have with working with people with dementia, with brain injuries, with executive functionings difficulties. So hopefully I'll address some of that. I know Lauren and Beck's in the background. I was sitting there waiting for questions, and I'll do my best to answer questions at the end. I think we'll all agree that we're in the era of the computer in your pocket, and the smartphone is undeniably mainstream technology, and we should also include tablet computers like the iPad or the Galaxy or whatever. They're basically just big phones. They work off the same technology, and they've had a real significant impact on our work. In a case conference not that long ago, a barrister asked me, well, what specific app should I recommend? That's difficult. And as I was saying to Lauren just before this started, apps change almost daily. So some of the stuff that you'll see today is as we've seen it and as it is current. And it's a very fast changing scenario. Please don't get me wrong. Mainstream technology is a part of what we recommend. The vast majority of the work that I and my colleagues do, working with case managers, with solicitors, revolves very much around some specialist technology. And that specialist technology might be alternative communication devices, it might be electronic braille displays, it might be some very sophisticated environmental aids. So the specialist assistive technology really still does have a vital role to play. But as I say, alongside of that, we've got our mainstream technology, which is absolutely fantastic. And we acknowledge the use of mainstream technology within our recommendations. When I began in this profession, which is far too long ago, and thanks to Lauren for giving you a little bit of my background, I was involved in bringing in technology into blind people, and very much at the time where some of you will remember the early versions of Windows 3, and people were saying, well, how can blind people see a mouse? How can blind people see icons on the screen? And it was breaking down those barriers so we could find the technology that we could do it. And Mike Gomm and I go back to very early stages where we were introducing that type of screen reader technology to visually impaired. But that technology was being developed by small companies, so small that it was quite often one man in a shed. Some people that are listening in may know of a one-handed keyboard. That literally is made by that is a one-man company that's been used for years and years and years. As a result, people viewed it as a very small niche market. Disabled people are not going to use technology. Goodness gracious, you know, that's what carers do. Well, I'm very happy to say that things have changed, are changing. We're not totally there, but we're beginning to get there. To give you a little bit of a background, in 2018, the UK government data stated that there were 13.9 million disabled people in the UK. And that means disabled people made up about 22% of the UK population. Strangely enough, that attracted the interest of the major technology providers, the Microsoft, the Googles, and they all began to enter the market. That was great news for us, because if we could use mainstream technology, we had the impact of volume, and that brought down prices, because many of you will know that one of the biggest barriers to some of the specialist technology is its cost. Those mainstream providers, they often collaborated with disability organisations such as Alzheimer's Society, British Heart Foundation, Guide Dogs for the Blind, Royal National Institute for the Blind. And they've developed a lot of this technology that you're going to see alongside. But they couldn't have done it without the advent of smartphones and tablets, because that has enabled people to be able to write apps. And we all hear about apps, and I'm sure you've all got devices with a whole myriad of different apps on your screen. But it also meant that we weren't relying on upper limb movements and fine motor movements to access and to touch the keys, to be able to use a keyboard. We've now got the ability to use voice input. Many of you will have had a car with a voice activated smartphone or operation in it, and you know, let's be honest, in its early stages of voice operation, voice recognition were not great. I know my wife felt that the more you shout at it, the more it's going to understand what you mean. I'm waiting for a device to turn around and say, please don't shout at me, but you know, it's there. But given that we could use voice, meant that people with a physical or an upper limb disorder could now access that technology. Just as a fact, you all carry a computer in your pocket or your handbag. There are very few of you listening into this webinar that won't use or haven't used a tablet or a smartphone in your everyday life. And to give you an example of the computer power in your pocket, today's typical iPhone has over 100,000 times the processing power and over 1 million times more memory than the computer that landed somebody on the moon. Now that just means we've got acres and acres of space to play with. This slide shows you a bit of history. I know, having seen a couple of the names on the attendees list, that some of you will recollect and remember the trials and tribulations we had with that mechanical page turner at the top of the screen. A lot of the technology that's developed in these early days wasn't that sophisticated. It was a bit Heath Robinson. As I said, man in a shed putting technology together, bolt here and a bit of a bolt there, and we'll give it a go. Now that mechanical page turner was aimed at people in wheelchairs that didn't have upper limb issues, and it was a massive industry at the time. You'd have to ask somebody to put the book on that device, and then by using a switch, it would hopefully turn the page. And I say hopefully because it was unreliable, it was very expensive, and it was replaced by what you can see on the right hand side there, a massive, almost endless library of books and literature available on a Kindle, on your phone, on your tablet device, on the computer. Huge changes. In the middle there, you've got a book scanner. That's a Kurzweil Reading Edge book scanner. And at the time, it was thousands of pounds worth. It was aimed specifically at people with a visual impairment. It's been replaced by what you see on the other side with the camera and your smartphone and using an app. Quite often we're using an app that's free, from thousands of pounds to free. Now, I'm sure many of you will still be able to remember the bottom screen and records and CD players. CD players were totally inaccessible to somebody with a physical disability. And I can remember Mike telling me that Steve Martin and Mike in the early days would be recommending multiple CD changes to give somebody some form of acceptance and access to music. Just think about now with Spotify and the likes of online music, again, endless and available in your pocket through your smartphone or through your speaker. Together with the amazing speed of how computing has progressed is the amazing ability of people who set and create apps that allow us to do what on the face of it can be quite simple things. The apps that you can see on the screen are a very small selection, and they allow people with executive memory functions to take notes, to have all their data and to all their notes and information in one folder. Couple there that you might see in the middle there, Claro. Claro is aimed at somebody with dyslexia to be able to read text, but the Claro Com is there for somebody who needs help with conversing and making somebody be able to understand. We can have pictograms on the screen. We can have access. We can use it for an alert. We can generally use it for people with memory issues, with autism. Quite often we will use devices to allow people when should they take their medication. If they've got a short-term memory issue, we can stick alerts in there. The family can put alerts in there. And yes, it might be that we allow somebody to have access to a Google Calendar, but that gives that person the ability to go out and about. A client I'm working with at the moment has epilepsy, and his mum's very cautious about letting him out and about because she wants to know where he is. Through the phone and through an app, we can track him. We can allow her to know where he is until he gets that level of independence. Some apps are not so great, and we regularly trial them, we regularly give them a go, we see how they are. And there's an organisation in Scotland called Call, and they produce regularly an app wheel of different organisations, different apps for different disabilities and different needs. And some of the apps are not so great, to be honest. Some are absolutely fantastic and have really changed the lives of some of my clients. I'll give you an example. I've got a client who has had a brain injury through a road traffic accident, and it's affected him in various ways, but probably the most impactful has been the fact he's lost the ability to read. Now he's in his early 30s, he's got a small family, and prior to his injury, he would take his daughter to bed, up to bed, read a story, and they had a routine. Since that accident, he hasn't been able to read. He hasn't been able to do that. And now that's caused both him and his family an enormous amount of emotional distress. He felt he couldn't do it. He felt he was no longer dad. This isn't what I do. Now he takes his iPad, and he's got an earpiece. He puts his iPad over the text. It reads the text to him, and he relays that to his daughter. Now he's not going to be able to do that forever and a day, but through this period of becoming living with the disability he now has, he's back to a family life, and they've got their routine. What I plan to do is to show you a few videos of some of the apps that are working quite well. Now, this is an app called Seeing AI, and it was developed by Microsoft in conjunction with visual impairment charities around the world. Let's just see what it does.
Seeing AI is a Microsoft research project for people with visual impairments. The app narrates the world around you by turning the visual world into an audible experience. Point your phone's camera, select a channel, and hear a description. The app recognizes saved friends.
Jenny near top right, 3 feet away.
Describes the people around you, including their emotions.
28-year-old female wearing glasses looking happy.
It reads text out loud as it comes into view, like on an envelope.
Ken Lawrence, P.O. Box.
Or a room entrance.
Conference 2005.
Or scan and read documents like books and letters. The app will guide you and recognize the text with its formatting.
Top and left edge is not visible. Hold steady. Lease agreement. This agreement.
When paying with cash, the app identifies currency bills.
$20 US.
When looking for something in your pantry or at the store, use the barcode scanner with audio cues to help you find what you want.
Campbell's tomato soup.
When available, hear additional product details.
Heat and microwave bowl on high.
And even hear descriptions of images in other apps like Twitter by importing them into Seeing AI.
A close-up of Bill Gates.
Finally, explore our experimental features like scene descriptions to get a glimpse of the future.
I think it's a young girl throwing a frisbee in the park.
Experience the world around you with the Seeing AI app from Microsoft.
Now, I've just seen a question that's come up that said, can I recommend a handwriting app for the blind that works fairly reliable? That app that you've just seen there on Seeing AI, it's still an experimental phase of recognizing handwriting. But as I'm sure many of you will realize, handwriting is so different and so individual that it makes life a bit more difficult. And from experience, it's not bad. it's probably not going to read a doctor's signature, who I'm sure were all injected with an ability to not be able to handwrite when they were born. And it's something that they certainly learned through medical college. But for somebody reading fairly clear handwriting, it's not too bad. The organisation in Scotland is called CALL, C-A-L-L. And whoever anonymous is that asked that question, if they like to email me, I will give you the details. So another app that has been life-changing for some of my type 1 diabetic clients is Libre LinkUp. Now, this is free, and what it does is it allows you to use your smartphone. Allows you to use your smartphone to scan a sensor, and that sensor will then detect blood glucose levels, upload them to the cloud. Now that allows family members who may be carers, may be concerned from mum and dad that aren't looking after their bloods. It may also make a big difference to remote nursing and remote monitoring. So the diabetic nurse can actually go in and see what blood glucose levels have been and how the average has been, and whether or not there needs to be a tweak to medication. Please don't get me wrong and get the impression that a smartphone or an iPad are the answer to absolutely everything, because they're not. What you can see on the screen is what used to be a CCTV, called a CCTV. Now we've changed it to sort of the general terminology is a video magnifier. And as you see on the right there, that's reading text. That's its fairly traditional use. But a massive part of one of my lady clients was the ability. She lost the ability to be able to do her own makeup, and she was trying to use a daughter. She gave up trying to use her husband to help with the makeup because that was an absolutely unmitigated disaster. But by sorting that camera out, she's able to see her own face and apply her own makeup. Again, huge change to her level of independence. That's something that she did every day that she was no longer able to do. Bit of technology, she could do it. Many years ago, or so even several years ago, I was attending a conference in America called CSUN. And CSUN is where an awful lot of this technology is first showcased. It also is an area where people develop and present research papers. And I was invited to sit in on a presentation where this American presenter told us that it wouldn't be very long before you would be wearing a device that would monitor your heart rate. And when that heart rate was getting a bit too much, it would notify that you were about to have a heart attack, contact the emergency services and tell them where you were. I have to say we were probably a little bit skeptical at the time, but some of you listening into this and watching this might have an iWatch, a smartwatch of some description. You might use it for reading emails, you might read it for text, you might set reminders, you might even actually use it for making a phone call. But did you know that many of them have a fall indicator that, as you can see on the screen, will notify emergency services, will call a nominated person? Or you can say, yeah, I did have a fall, but I'm okay, I don't need anybody. Or no, do you know what? That wasn't real. I didn't really have one. I've got a client, I was talking to the case manager this morning, where he has executive functioning difficulties, this young lad, and he forgets to do stuff. Yeah, all right, okay, he's a young lad, and that's part of what he does anyway. That's part of his DNA to forget things, especially when his mum asks him to do it. But by using the smartwatch, we can make sure that he gets unobtrusive reminders. She can find out where he is. We get these unobtrusive reminders about where he's going and what he's doing. But it also means he doesn't have to get out of his pocket a brand new iPhone. So we've got some built-in phone safety along the way. So that's sort of the smartwatch ideas. Smart devices like Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant have been on the horizon since the late 1990s, early 2000s. But really, it's only since about 2014, with the launch of the Alexa, that they've become available in most people's homes. They really were a geeky item. But now, you know, just to give you a clue, an interest, there is over 13 billion, that's 13 billion interconnected digital and electronic devices across the world. And industry forecasts predict that by 2021, the average North American home will have 13 smart devices in their home. Now, this will include wireless speakers, includes central heating thermostats. How many of you have got a thermostat that's difficult to get at anyway, so you're having to reach for it? If you're in a wheelchair, you definitely can't reach at it. It's up here somewhere. Home security and monitoring systems. Domestic robots. Not many of those. I haven't recommended many domestic robots. I've done robotic hoovers and vacuum cleaners. Smoke and CO2 detectors, lighting. If you've got chronic arthritis, if you've got issues with your prosthesis wherein you've taken your prosthetic off to sit and watch the TV, and you need a light turning on, it's an awful lot easier to go, Alexa, turn on the light, than it is either find your leg or balance to get across to turn the light on. Home energy use monitors, door locks, find anybody with a fine motor movement control issues, somebody who's visually impaired. The simple act of taking a key and the coordination of taking that key and putting it into the lock can be hugely difficult. We might use an electronic tag, or we might use a keypad, taking away that ability. You could, there are apps where you could do it from your smartphone. Smart refrigerators. I'll let you into a little bit of a secret. Mike Gom is probably at this point just laughing at me because I know he's listening in, to say, yeah, Andy's probably the leading expert on smart fridges for blind people. I was asked to invest some time into investigating how a smart fridge would work for somebody who's visually impaired, and will it automatically detect what you've got, what you need to buy. Well, it sort of does, but it tends to use an app which actually isn't accessible to somebody who's visually impaired. Quite often it's got a camera inside the fridge that you can see what's in the fridge, but you can't see in the salad drawer. You can't see what's in a Tupperware container. So yeah, it's sort of smart, but it's not that smart. So I think we can probably all agree that you've had some smart detection devices that are better than others. Let's just have a look at one particularly useful smart device.
Alexa, what's the time?
It's 6 a.m.
Alexa, what's the weather like right now? Currently it's light rain.
Really interesting and useful for that lady. But how does it work? Well, the key to these devices is the need to use the internet. And I'm sure in these lockdown times, most of you listening into this or watching this will have used Zoom. You will have used Microsoft Teams to do internet meetings. And I'm absolutely positive that a lot of you will have encountered that dropout moment when things just appear to stop. And we all know that the coverage and speed of what is billed as high-speed internet and broadband coverage isn't everything that we're told. I'm quite lucky. My children have up and left, but I hear tales of mum and dad both trying to work while the two kids are trying to play computer games. That just level of coverage really isn't there. As you can see from this slide, if we're using smart devices, there are several points of failure, potential failure. That could be issues with the router. How many times have you had to go back and reboot a router? Well, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't do that. If you're visually impaired, you probably can do that, but it's a bit more difficult. It could be just the Wi-Fi itself. It just drops out. It's just not got enough space. Could also be, and we mentioned this earlier, the quality of a person's voice or dysphasia. It doesn't work better when you shout at it. It puts it out. So it needs a constant level of command. And also with somebody with short-term memory problem, it's going to take a lot longer to use because you need to get the right phraseology. Yep, we can alter that phraseology and you can change to an extent the commands that you give it. But nevertheless, you have to be fairly consistent. And now, if you want to just turn the light on and off or adjust the heating, dropouts can be just an annoyance. But if you need to rely on it for an emergency or for life independence, I will often still recommend a much more traditional route, similar to this. So in the middle there, you've got the controller. This particular instance, it's controlled by a switch. That could be a joystick, it could be a wobble switch, it could be a muscle switch, it could be voice. And that controller then sends a signal, a direct signal to, in this situation, we're looking at a call system or a telephone, or maybe even the bed controls. That controller in the middle can do a whole myriad of different things and control a huge number of things, as you'll see by this video.
Housemates Pro is an easy-to-use device that allows users to have full hands-free access of their smartphone or tablet. It's suitable for able-bodied users as well as those with a wide range of disabilities. Housemates Pro enables complete control of all the assistive technology in one's home, including opening and closing doors, curtains and blinds, turning lights on and off, answering your front door video entry, hello, and letting you control the telly. It's a communications device, environmental control, medical call, and recreational device, all rolled into one. Whether you're dealing with mobile calls and texting, calling for emergency help, integrating with your Sonos music system, or even flying a drone. Housemates Pro allows you to do it all, even with restricted mobility or completely hands-free if necessary. It can even do your talking for you. It's compatible with assistive technology switches such as buddy button, muscle twitch, wheelchair joysticks, or accessing directly from your smartphone or tablet. Housemates Pro, the smart way to control your world.
As you can see, that shouldn't, just because we're putting in some technology, that shouldn't replace the need for care or support. It should be there to enhance that care and support and just give somebody that added bit of dignity and independence. So just to sum up, really, smart devices are good for, excuse me, medication reminders. The Alexa in the corner will just go ping, you need to take your tablets. In this time of COVID needs and coronavirus, I think some of these devices have been hugely important for contact with families and to help maintain that some semblance of connectivity with them, and hopefully that's helped. We've got a team meeting tomorrow where we're going to talk about and discuss. In the past, we probably haven't had much in the way of remote therapies. Working with a client who cerebral palsy young man who is having some therapies delivered remotely, but we're having to use an iPad. So the thought of using a much bigger 55-inch screen with a camera that he can see easier, perhaps even a camera that follows a bit more that's going on in the room, enables that therapy to be delivered remotely. He still gets his therapy. There isn't an issue, but it's a better interactive system. We can turn the smart devices are great for turning the lights on and off, the control them, and playing music and reading books is still a massive part of the independence that a person may have had before a catastrophic event. Perhaps a year ago, maybe even 18 months ago, you might have had a telephone call with a healthcare practitioner or your doctor. The fact now that it's quite normal for them to FaceTime you or to WhatsApp you and get that bit of independence and still get a connectivity with them. Answering the front door, or well, more importantly, making contact with somebody at the front door. If they're a vulnerable person, we can check before you open the door that there's somebody that you really want to let in. Yeah, and in some instances that might be something that the care person does, but they should still, as I said earlier, have that dignity of being able to answer their own front door. We've talked about voice recognition, and that's great for dictating. You can use Microsoft Word and the facilities within Windows to dictate into emails, use Outlook. You can use in some of the new versions of Word, you've got a dictate function that will directly dictate in Apple. You'll see in a minute we can use voice control a lot, but where we need to control it more, we must probably still go back to the more traditional form of Dragon Naturally Speaking. Had some pretty bad press in the past, but it's hugely better. And a program like this would give us the ability to create particular programs or scripts to enable specific tasks. So it might be not something we will use necessarily so much in a home environment these days, but when that person goes on into the employment or into education, we could use that. I said earlier that the big companies, the Apples and the Windows of the world, Microsoft of the world, are looking at voice control and bringing their massive resources into play. And I also said that one of the major issues with voice control and voice recognition is the quality and the standard of that person's voice. Let's just have a look at something that Google are doing to work with people with dysarthria.
Google has very good general speech recognition, but if you do not sound as most of people, it will not understand you.
No one's ever collected large data sets of people whose speech is hard for others to understand.
People who have multiple sclerosis, for GF, who had stroke, who stutter.
They're not used in training the speech recognition models. I mean, the game is to record things and then have it recognize things that you say that aren't in the training set. Dimitri recorded 15,000 phrases. It wasn't obvious that this was going to work. He just sat there and he kept recording.
We need to make all voice interactive devices be able to understand any person who speaks to them.
You can see that it's possible to make a speech recognizer to work for Dimitri. It should be possible to make it work for many people, even people who can't speak because they've lost the ability to speak. The work that Shanxing has done on, voice utterances, from sounds alone, you can communicate. But there might be other ways of communicating.
Most people with ALS end up using an on-screen keyboard and having to type each individual letter with their eyes. For me, communicating is slow.
Steve might crack a joke, and it's related to something that happened, a few minutes ago. The idea is to create a tool so that Steve can train machine learning models himself to understand his facial expressions. To be able to laugh, to be able to cheer, to be able to boo. Things that seem maybe superfluous, but actually are so core to being human.
I still think this is only the tip of the iceberg. We're not even scratching the surface yet of what is possible. If we can get speech recognizers to work with small numbers of people, we'll learn lessons which we can then combine to build something that really works for everyone.
To understand and be understood is absolutely unbelievable.
Okay, now the work that Apple are doing.
Wake up. Voice control is a breakthrough feature that gives you full control of your devices, with just your voice, period. It's a whole new way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wake up. Voice control is a breakthrough feature that gives you full control of your devices, with just your voice, period. It's a whole new way to do everything you love, period. Like this. Correct love. 16. Open photos. Scroll up. Show numbers. 13. Click share. 3. Tim. Next field. Let's ride this one today. Thumbs up emoji. Click send. Open maps. Show grid. Long press at 20. Open app switcher. 4. Tap share. Tap Tim. Tap send.
Hey, good to see you.
Open music. Turn up the volume.
All right.
Great stuff, isn't it? And but what you will get there is an awful lot of commands. Now I'm getting told that I'm running out of time, so I'll speed on a little bit. Okay, the device this is a really specialist piece of device, and it's a refreshable brow display. So the dots that you see going across the screen, they raise up and down, and they allow somebody who is a braillist to be able to access all information on the screen. clients I've worked with that use these include civil surgeons, civil servants, directors, or even solicitors. Now, this piece of kit really is specialist. Okay, so during this presentation, I've hopefully taken you a bit of a journey through a variety of some of the mainstream technologies that impact on the day-to-day lives of our clients. But I think you'll agree that not always is the everyday stuff the mainstream bit of technology that we need, and quite often there's still that need for the specialist piece of kit. We believe that you will still be needing us. I think that, as you've seen a couple of times, I've put a slide up that said you don't know what you don't know. Thank you to you all once again for your time, and thanks to Owen Mitchell for the invitation to talk to you this morning. I think it's over to Lauren.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much, Andy. Let's go through some of the many questions which have been put. And I'm going to just do this chronologically. How do I manage with Dragon speech software as I have moderate speech impediment? I have tried many times in the past, but I only get 60% accuracy.
In the past, I would agree that you would have had more difficulties. With some of the later versions, I've encountered a much less difficulty with recognition. It also is very dependent upon the quality of your microphone and the processing power of your computer.
Okay, thank you very much. And by the way, I should add that if anyone does have any questions which they feel haven't been answered fully, or they'd like to discuss further with Andy, then feel free to email or call him via the contact details in the second slide of this presentation. You will be getting a YouTube link later, probably in a day or two, and you'll be able to view those then. Right, next question. I'm trying to use an Apple Pencil on an iPad Pro to allow a visually impaired client to handwrite from a fine motor skills perspective, to turn it into printed text, as he finds this easier to read. Is there a good app that can do that?
Not that I can think of that comes immediately to mind. If you email me in, I'll have a bigger dig for you.
Okay. Do you use AT for rehabilitation or mainly for adaptation? How do you ensure that your prescription of AT does not hinder rehabilitation. For example, decreases motor skills due to being able to operate with voice. And that's from Luke.
Well, Luke, I'm a rehab officer for visually impaired, so everything I do and everything that's in my being is to increase independence and not increase dependency. So very much I'm a, if a rubber band around a pen enables somebody with fine motor movements to hold a pen, then that's technology as far as I'm concerned. So it should be in conjunction with and not against independence.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Do you think that it is important to highlight the requirements for not only specialist installation, but ongoing support and service or maintenance issues? Also, caution must be taken with respect to critical functions that can be affected by internet issues, and that's a question by Graham Marsh.
Graham, I totally agree. And in any of my reports or any of those of my colleagues, you will always see a section promoting and recommending training, not just for the person that's involved, but for those around that person that are supporting them, with an allowance for that training to be ongoing, because as we all know, support teams change and move on. I think I covered the fact that I don't use internet reliant technology for critical functions.
Okay, and let's have a look at the next question. Merin C asked, what are the options for voice recognition to write emails in Outlook or Gmail, etc.?
Within the operating system, within Word, you should be able to do that. Within the new packages of Microsoft 365, you should have an ability to dictate into those fields.
Okay, Graham Marsh again. In terms of voice recognition, e.g. Alexa, have you encountered problems with regional accents, e.g. Geordie accents?
No, Graham, I haven't.
Okay, that was an easy answer. And from Maria at circlecm.com, thank you for the information provided so far. Apart from those discussed, what are your top 20 most useful apps? So that might be something that, Maria, if you provide us your email address or email Andy can get in touch with you after the webinar.
That's fine, Maria.
Joanne Lowe, who's an OT, is asking, are you saying that a controller means that it cuts out potential problems with Wi-Fi? Can you explain what difference this makes rather than everything being controlled through a smartphone tablet device?
Because we don't need to use with a traditional environmental control system, it works on very much line of sight, or it works on a radio wave, infrared or Bluetooth. So we can control that environment and we don't have to worry about any external routers or Wi-Fi's.
Okay, thanks, Sally. And then a question from a carer. iPad Touch seems to be really difficult for the elderly. I work in a care home and lots of families have bought their relatives iPads or Galaxies, but something about the responsiveness of an elderly finger touch seems to be really problematic. I've made the icons larger, but it's something else. Help, she says.
Sorry, I didn't catch the name.
I don't think we have a name for that, I'm afraid.
Okay, carer person. If you go into the settings of the iPad, into accessibility, there's a sensitivity button. You can change the sensitivity within the accessibility section.
Okay. And last question from U.Davies, an NHS staff member. Some people have had concerns over the data ownership. Are you aware of alternatives to Google or Alexa?
I do. I acknowledge that there's issues with some people's concerns about that. Generally, people get to accept the issue that Google Alexa and Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant are the piece of kit that we work with. If there was a need to do otherwise, we would have to go to a more traditional aim. So no, I don't know of a particular alternative.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, that's the end of the questions and also the end of the time allotted for the webinar. So thank you so much again, Andy, for a really fascinating insight into assistive technology. Again, if anyone does have any questions that haven't been covered or that suddenly pop up after the webinar in your mind, then please do contact either Andy or myself. It remains for me to thank you very much for logging into this webinar. Should you wish any more information in relation to coronavirus and the financial and legal implications, please do contact us or visit irwinmitchell.com. There's a specific coronavirus hub for you to look at there, and it really is very interesting. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice rest of the day.